Hey guys, what's up? I'm Jake, and this is another JumpJet episode where we're going through typical front-end developer questions that you might run across when you're going for a web developer or front-end developer job. So let's jump straight into it. We're going through the HTML section of the questions, and today's episode is going to be, what is the data attribute good for? So if you're not familiar with the data attribute, it's an HTML custom attribute that we can add to the page in order for us to manipulate it via JavaScript. So over here I prepared a really basic little example. You'll see here I've got a paragraph with an ID of user, and within that I've given it a custom attribute, a data attribute, and here it's data/user ID, which is the name I've given the attribute, and I've given it a value of 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll just show you here that the syntax to use, this is going to throw up a couple of errors, but anyways, data/name equals value. And so that's how we give that data attribute a value, and that enables us to read data and write data directly to that element within the DOM. So here you'll see we've got data/user ID 1, 2, 3, 4. I've grabbed the element, so I've just called it the element here. I'm grabbing the user ID, the ID, I'm calling it user. And one way for us to read that data that I've added to the element is using the element dot dataset. So this is native JavaScript that we're using to grab the data. And if we run this, you'll see here that I've got this DOM object, and within that I have this property called user ID. So this is the value that we've set. We can go even further, and we can go the element dot dataset dot user ID and grab that exact value. So you can see now that we've got an element on the page. We use that data attribute to retrieve data from it. We can go beyond that. We can use it to write data to the attribute. So here let's do the element.dataset.userid, and let's give it a value of 99. Okay, and you'll actually see that something has changed up here because I'm also targeting that element with the data.userid of 99 with CSS. So if we change it back, over here on the right, you'll see this changes color again. So let's change it to 100. Yep, so that's no longer being targeted. And you'll see here, we can actually see the value changing within the HTML page. So we've got data.userid is 100, and let's change it to 1,000. No, let's do 678. There we go. So you can see that we can read data from that element, and we can write it to that element using this data attribute. So primarily it's used to store data. We tend to use the data attribute when there isn't a native HTML attribute already there. So for example, you have an element called the time element, which looks like this. Time. And within that has its own dedicated syntax for the date time attribute. So in that case, we wouldn't need to write an additional data attribute. We use it primarily when there's a particular type of data or ID or some way of identifying an element that doesn't already exist within HTML. You actually are probably familiar with this in another way, so I'm just going to bring up a project. Bootstrap and Foundation are front-end libraries that use the data attribute extensively. So we see here, we've got the data.toggle. So Bootstrap is using this as a way for their JavaScript to hook into the DOM. So for example, when they're opening and closing drop-downs, or if they're opening and closing modals. So they've created a custom attribute data/toggle, and that gives their own JavaScript a way to reach into the page and change some values. One thing additionally to remember with the data attribute is that it's private to the page. So user agents like a search engine, like the Google bot or what have you, doesn't have access to our data attributes, and neither do third-party websites. So it's not something that you would offer up for an outside party to manipulate. It's purely for internal use. There are a variety of ways to retrieve and set the data. I have pulled up jQuery. I don't use jQuery too much anymore, but let's try this. We're going to go in and I'm going to get the user attribute. Let's say like var y equals, okay. This looks a bit messy, but anyway. So now we have access to this particular element. And if we go further into that, let's say var y equals the user dot attribute data slash user ID. There we go. So you can use jQuery to pull out and to read and write those attributes. I think more and more front-end developers are using jQuery less and less, and also direct DOM manipulation is kind of frowned upon to an extent these days. So usually it's abstracted away, and you won't be doing stuff like this, like directly targeting the data attributes, but it's good to know that you can. Yeah, and I think that's the basics of the data attribute. As I mentioned, you can target it with CSS, but once again, you know, you got to have a really good reason for why you are using data attributes rather than classes to target an element on the page. But it's good to know that that's an option available to you. Yeah, so if you get that question within a developer interview, those are the basics, and I think that if you can answer with a few of those bits of information, you're going to show that you kind of understand what it's for and why you may use it, or even why you may not use it. Okay, so if I've made any terrible mistakes or you totally disagree with what I said for whatever reason, or if you like what I'm sharing with you and you want to subscribe, do that. Comment, anything. I'm really I'm building this from the ground up, and I appreciate your input. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in the next episode, and good luck.